Hey, thanks so much for being with us on Conquering Retirement. I'm Brad Johansson with Northern Alliance Financial CEO Lance Gilman and Jeremy Barnard joining us today. Gentlemen, always nice to be back with you.
Great to see you, Brad.
Let's talk a little bit about uncertainty. We're in a time of pause, chaos, division. I mean, I sit here with those pauses intentionally because there are people trying to figure stuff out and answer some of the questions. Before we get to answering some of the uncertainty, you guys are continuing to expand, which is exciting. I want you to talk about what you've done lately, because what you've done is reach out into all areas of Maine. This is another step in that. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is we've hired 2 additional advisors,
which is
for the staff, which is huge. So we brought on Cameron Graham, and he is an advisor that's predominantly focused in the Bangor Brewer North area.
Nice.
And so he actually was a graduate of Husson University. He had an undergraduate in finance and business and then went on for a master's in finance and business. And so he's a welcome addition to the team for the Bangor Brewer North area. And then we also hired another advisor, CFP, Blake King, and he is actually in the central Maine area. And so what we realized, Brad, is that there was a little bit of a void in our imprint coverage for Maine. Yep. And that void actually was right in the center of the state.
Got to fill the center.
You got to fill the center, man. Yeah, so, and it's just so happens that Blake lived very close to the Hollowell area, and an opportunity came forward where we were given the capability to have an office in Hollowell.
Outstanding.
So we jumped on that, and so now we have not only 2 new advisors, but we have that footprint that was a void now covered in the central Maine area in Hollowell.
Filling the map.
Yeah. Got to fill the map.
Anywhere you need to be, there's an office there, and that's what you're trying to do. So there are a lot of people, as I said, who are concerned about the climate, and it's everywhere throughout the state, if not throughout the country. What do you see, Jeremy, as probably the biggest concern that people have because of the state of where we're in? Going into retirement is confusing enough, but to be in the state that the country's in right now adds a little bit more uneasiness for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing with a lot of the clients that we work with, it's just that everything is changing so quickly, and everything feels out of control because of that. I love what you brought up about things being uncertain and taking a pause to really assess the situation, look at your options, make sure you're as well informed as possible before making decisions. One of the challenges with these changing times and environments is that some of the choices that people have to make are permanent choices. They're lifelong choices. There's not a lot of times in our life where we're faced with that, and in this changing and uncertain time, permanent choices can be really challenging to make.
Okay, so if I'm uncertain about something and I'm scared to make a decision, what's the biggest thing that you see, Lance, right now with the people that you're talking to that prevents them from feeling like they can retire?
I think the biggest thing that I see right now is that everything is so expensive because we're going through a hyperinflationary time,
right,
where we haven't seen for decades, 40 years of like the highest rates of inflation that we've seen in 40 years. And so people are actually afraid to retire, Brad, because they see the cost of things just going so dramatically out of control. And so what I would encourage somebody, if you're in that position, let's have you come in, let's do some work. Let's figure out what your budget looks like, both now and in retirement. Let's look at what your Social Security options are going to be. And as Jeremy said, many times when you're making these decisions, it's a permanent decision. You can't go back and try to undo filing for Social Security. And if you're doing that without help, without a professional, you're making those decisions unguided. And so we would encourage you to just come in. Let's lay the cards out, and don't just say, well, it's just so expensive right now that I'm going to put my retirement off for another year or two. Maybe we need to do that. But we don't know that until you come in and actually, let's do the math.
Now, I've spent a lot of time in talking to people, even interviewing people on the street about retirement. The one constant you will hear is when you ask people about where they are now and where they could have been, the answer always ends up being, I wish I would have 10 years ago visited somebody who knew what they were doing, who could take me through that.
Yep.
Right.
I know that you guys hear that a lot. What's the first, and look, because of that, there's a fear for a lot of people. I did it wrong. I'm embarrassed that I did it wrong. I don't want to come in and visit an advisor because there's a lot of shame that ends up going along. What's the first thing you do when somebody walks in the office, Jeremy?
First thing we do is certainly welcome them warmly. And I like to think we have an attitude of understanding that it actually is a brave step to make a phone call. I hear it all the time that people have watched our show for years and they finally called. You know, facing these unknowns, these uncertainties, and taking a stand and finally saying, I'm going to take control of my life, my financial life, and my financial future, that's a big deal. So we want to honor that when you come in, you make the phone call, set up an appointment with us, and it is simply a continuation of the conversation. You know, we're having a conversation here, it's easygoing, we have a great time. These topics are so near and dear to us, and we focus on them so much. I pride us on our ability to communicate effectively these complex things in a very approachable way.
Yeah. Simplify it.
Yeah.
Well, people will say, okay, I already got a plan. I got a 401k. There's something in my portfolio. Does that equate to a plan, Lance?
No, that equates to a portfolio. And then the plan is, what are we doing with that portfolio?
Yeah.
That starts the real planning process. But ultimately, what we're going to do when you come in is we're going to first ask you what your goals are. What are the things that really drive you, that would motivate you to be considering your retirement as a success? And it's different for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever that is for you, it's going to be different for every single person. And the interesting thing, a lot of times when people come in, they don't feel like they'll ever be able to retire. And I've actually had people, and I'm sure you have too, Jeremy, where after sitting down for that first initial consultation and working through the numbers and getting up on the whiteboard and showing them the math and saying that the only thing that's preventing you from retiring right now is you. I've had people literally break down in tears, Brad, in the office.
Well, it's an emotional thing. We've done one thing all of our lives, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, some people even longer than that. Nobody teaches you how to do this. That's the income that you have. Then you go to retire. How do you generate income when you retire? That's a lot of the question, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you answer it?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the beautiful things about that question is that it's mathematically based first. We can answer a lot of questions about what people's retirement is going to look like by using mathematical software programs that we have. So we can really drill down to a pretty fine level of what your retirement is going to look like. And only then should we maybe making assumptions or talking about opinions of what we think is best. Let's get as much factual information on the table, and there's quite a bit that you can do in that regard. And then we'll talk about things like life expectancy, average rates of return, should I put money into a bank or an annuity or investments. That's when we can really start to kind of flesh out the details a lot more once we get that math done.
In generating income, Lance, you've talked about the rule of 55. Fill me in on the rule of 55 as you try and get ready for retirement.
So that's an interesting concept, because it's interesting that you brought it into this discussion, because we are originally talking about people in uncertain times that aren't even sure that they can retire ever.
Right.
But then we also have people that want to retire now, and they're not considered retirement age.
Yeah.
Which, that's kind of an arbitrary thing. If you think about, like, who's determining when you can retire?
Yeah.
Yep.
The government, right? It's like people have these ideas in their mind. Well, I can retire in a year and a half. I said, well, what do you mean you can retire in a year and a half? Well, that's when my full age is for retirement. Right. Well, remember, that full age for retirement is an arbitrary number that somebody in the government picked.
Yeah,
That's right.
It doesn't mean it's when you have to retire.
Yep.
So what if let's goes back to your question, Brad. Like you're 55 years old, and let's say you've been able to pay off your debts over the course of your life. So you're just down to an operational need, and then you've saved in addition to that a pretty decent portfolio. Is it feasible that you could retire at 55? Absolutely. Well, why wouldn't we do that? Well, I don't know. We need to come. You need to come see us.
I think it also brings up an important point when you're talking about, listen, this retirement age that everyone has in their mind, it is kind of government, based, government driven. But retirement really is meant for anybody whenever their finances allow them to do that, allow them to retire. And ultimately, it's about freedom. If you got the freedom to choose to live your lifestyle the way that you want, then I think you're retired. And if you need $2,000 a month to feel free, or if you need $15,000 a month to feel free, whatever your number is, once you're there, then I think you're free to retire and live your life.
But going back to the rule of 55 is if you wanted to retire early, then basically the rule says if you've got money in a 401k, typically you'd have to wait, Brad, till 59 and a half to start drawing that money penalty-free. And that penalty, on top of paying tax, is an additional 10%. So you don't want to have an additional 10% tax.
Right.
However, this rule says you can take money if you sever employment, either you're severing employment or for whatever reason you lose your job. So the employer basically says, we're cutting your position, or you decide to walk, and you're over the age of 55, you can take money from that employer plan without that penalty. So that's how we could structure an income potentially drawing out of that qualified 401k, 403b, or whatever your employer plan is during that window from 55 to 59 and a half.
Interesting. Well, income is the outcome in retirement. And as Lance said, it's different for everyone. Do you want to start early? Are you hoping to start late? Do you not know when you're going to start? This is where the comprehensive plan comes into play. And maybe you are one of those who've gone through the fear or feeling shame or I just can't call. Well, we're talking to you because now may be the time for you to call 877-241-7430. And come in and make an appointment so that we can create a comprehensive plan because everybody is different. As a matter of fact, in coming in, you get a copy of Lance's book, Conquering Retirement. That's complimentary. We'll put together a plan for you. That's complimentary, which gives you the indication now is the time to call. Or click the QR code on your screen. Let's set up an appointment. Let's go into more of our comprehensive plan when Conquering Retirement returns.
Our team at Northern Alliance is very diverse in terms of the services that we offer.
We do take a team-based approach.
We carry multiple licenses so that clients can do everything within the Northern Alliance financial team.
If it has anything to do with retirement, that's what we specialize in.
Budget planning, tax considerations, Social Security strategies, risk management, long-term care, Medicare, health planning, as well as legal and estate planning.
We really are a one-stop shop.
There's Lance Gilman, Peter Hansen, Jeremy Barnard, myself. We do have a staff that is great.
In Maine, we have multiple locations to cover the vast array of the state.
You can come in and have a conversation in person. And a lot of people are looking for these days. Things after COVID have changed to more Zoom, phone call sort of things. And we'll do those things, but we appreciate and would rather have you come in person and have a conversation face to face like this.
We're pretty approachable, and we're going to listen to you. We're going to try to determine what your needs, your aspirations, those goals are, and then we're going to do everything that we possibly can to help you meet those goals.
It's lighthearted, it's carefree. We laugh like crazy. An atmosphere that I don't think is common in a lot of other practices.
We were talking about how well the team is bonding together, how similarly we all think in that what we do, we want to actually make a difference.
Average, everyday people helping average, everyday people.
We truly do put the client first.
Our mantra has been, when you take care of people, people take care of you.
So glad you're with us on Conquering Retirement. I'm Brad Johansson with Lance and Jeremy today as we're talking about moving through uncertain times. The uncertainty always ends up being with taxes. I think a lot of people believe that healthcare is going to be their greatest cost. Well, that may be at the very end. What we're learning now is that taxes are probably the most ignored and maybe the most expensive as you head into retirement. And we're kind of in a window right now where it's especially important, Lance, for us to be talking about taxes and how we're going to deal with that in retirement. Why now is it so important?
Well, taxes, unfortunately, are those things that we know we're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay taxes on those monies that you have set aside in your qualified plan. So that's your 401k, your 403b, your 457, your thrift savings plan, if you're working with the government, IRAs, things like that. So they're qualified. What does that mean? That means that you haven't paid taxes on those monies yet. And so that qualifies you by the federal government to pay taxes later.
Yeah.
And so the issue then is going to be coming, well, what are the tax rates going to be later? We don't know what the tax rates are going to be later. But with the government at $34 trillion of debt right now and accelerating at rapid rates, one can assume, if you canvass 100 people in a room and say, what do you think? Taxes in the future are going to be higher or are they going to be lower?
They're going up.
Right.
They're most likely going to be up. So if we know that, why not do something to the effect of taking some of that money out of that pre-tax bucket and get it converted into a Roth, let's say, over the course of the next year and a half. Why over the course of the next year and a half? Because in 2016, there was legislation passed, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which reduced 5 of the 7 marginal tax breaks to the lowest rates we've seen in 40 years. Okay, well, if the rates are the lowest we've seen in 40 years, and we think rates are going up maybe significantly higher in the future.
Do you like a sale?
Yeah, right. I think we can't emphasize that point enough because, nobody feels like we're in a low tax environment.
Right.
Everybody's like, oh my gosh, I pay so much in taxes. And we do in some regards for sure. But it feels like we pay so much. And in reality, like you're saying, it's been decades, many decades, since taxes have been this low. And certainly for this long, it's even further than 40 years ago. So we are in a really good time. I love thinking about taxes that are on sale right now. This is a kind of a Marden's moment. Go to Marden's. Rennie's. Get everything on discount. Your 401k is 100% taxable. If we wait too much longer, it's just going to be less of that money in your pocket because taxes, by law, are going to be going up in the near future. So,
All right. We talk about qualified accounts, which qualifies you to pay, and a lot of these accounts. This kind of goes back to what we've talked about many times is, what's my number? Here's my number. And I've got my number. My number looks pretty good until I realize that I've got a partner with my number. It's not all mine. It's not what you have. It's what you get to keep. And so when you have people coming in right now with these qualified accounts, understanding a plan, we overemphasize plans, which is why you're asking people to come in and say, you know what, you probably have a bunch of stuff out there that you don't realize is qualified that the government is a partner within. Take me through the preparation process of creating a plan for somebody with many of these qualified accounts.
Yeah, a lot of times what happens is, especially if people are in the medical field for whatever reason, they tend to bounce around a lot, Brad, when they get a job when they first graduate, and then they kind of move around. And I've had one instance where I had a nurse practitioner that had 13 different accounts.
oh, sure.
It's not uncommon.
Because each place they go to, there's a new one starting.
Correct. And they still have their other one. And that when they first started work or whatever, 20, 30 years ago, it's still there in Alabama or wherever they were when they started. And so what we want to do is figure out where all these accounts are, because they do all add up to this big bucket that we've got to start thinking about. We've got to pay taxes on that eventually. So that's one of the things we're going to do is we're going to say, where are all your accounts? And so interestingly enough, as people start to bring these statements and we start to amass and say, how much money do you think you have in your, they don't know, Brad.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't know.
It's like our junk drawer in the kitchen, right?
That's right.
I got a lot of stuff in there, but I don't know exactly what's in there. Now, it all may be useful in many of these accounts,
Sure.
which is why we're kind of talking about the timing of a lot of these things, because there are strategies with taxes that probably need to be utilized at this point. First in cleaning up the junk drawer, but maybe even converting things. We talk about the Roth, and probably now is one of those times we should probably interject. Why is it so important that a Roth conversion or moving to a Roth at this point is so important, Jeremy?
Yeah, I like to think about moving to a Roth and creating these different types of taxable accounts or non-taxable accounts, and just saying we're adding diversity to your overall portfolio.
Yeah.
We understand the value of that in a stock portfolio being diverse. Hopefully it's going to mean better growth, better safety patterns, and long-term growth. But being tax diverse in your retirement accounts is really important as well. Having some money in the bank, having money in your 401k, IRAs, Roths, the more diverse buckets we can have, again, I think that's just going to add a lot of flexibility to our plans year after year. And ultimately, for some people, and for maybe a lot, having money in a Roth just adds so much carefree possible spending down the road.
The idea of paying tax now while you're on sale and not paying the government
Ever again.
Ever again. All right, a lot of you have questions. I'm going to get to some of those questions. Again, copy of the book is yours complimentary, Conquering Retirement, that Lance has put together. It's yours free to come in for an appointment. Maybe you have some questions that you'd like to ask in person. We'd love to see you in the office. 877-241-7430. Set up an appointment. Let's put together a complimentary plan for you, as well as a copy of the book. More questions on the way when Conquering Retirement returns.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter, the one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
As always, we're so glad you joined us on Conquering Retirement. I'm Brad Johansson with Lance and Jeremy. You have a lot of questions. A lot of times you're afraid to voice them, but we have some of them. We're going to voice them, and maybe it will spur something in you. So let's get to Michael, who says he's 53, guys. I'm concerned that I'm not diversified enough. I have both international and domestic stocks. At the moment, that's all. Should I look into real estate investments or precious metals? Thank you. I appreciate your tips every week. You want to start with that one, Lance?
Sure. So I think that a lot of people do look at real assets as a potential investment. And if you have a windfall of money, sometimes looking at real assets is viable. Understanding, though, that when you invest in real assets, like if you're going to buy real estate, you're taking that money and you're putting it into an illiquid chassis. And real estate has done pretty well over time, consistently well. It's a real asset. And they're not making any more land.
Yeah.
So typically, especially, it's all about location, 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 they say with real estate. So you need to understand where you're buying, and you don't want to buy kind of upside down, but typically that's a real asset and you can put money in there. But the other thing that I would caution people about with investing in real estate is that when you do that, not only is it illiquid, now you're tying your money up in that real asset, and if you need to get access to that money, you need to sell it. Well, you might not be able to sell it right away. And so there's the illiquid portion of the real estate, but also you're also committing to be a landlord.
Oh, yeah.
And if that's something that you're interested in, you're going to be dealing with the people factor versus just saying, like, taking your money and investing it, and then you're going to get a return on that money. There's no people involved in that necessarily. it's a much more liquid, and you have access to that money, and you're not dealing with the people factor. So, and the other point is precious metals. Again, kind of same issue there, Brad. It's a real asset. But then if you need to get access to the cash value of that, you got to go find somebody that's going to buy that. And you don't know what kind of exchange you're going to get in that process, who you're dealing with. So I would just caution somebody there and just kind of really think this through. Maybe come in and talk to us about it before you make that kind of a decision.
Yeah, Michael, this sounds like with the stuff that you have, a ton of risk, that you might want to come in for a plan. This is what we're talking about. Time for one more. Gwendolyn. What should I do with RMD funds after paying taxes if there is currently no need for the funds and I want them to grow in limited risk? Jeremy?
I mean, what a beautiful situation for Gwendolyn. I love that. Would that we all were in that situation.
Yeah, right.
Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. I think the first thing I would say is the RMDs that are coming in, if you don't need them for your regular operating expenses and everything else is taken care of, we might want to start thinking about doing Roth conversions to get rid of RMDs in the future. That'd be my first thought. Not your question exactly, but something to think about for ongoing years. When people have this situation, I think there's great opportunities right now with certain types of annuities that offer guarantee principal protection, meaning you put $10,000 into it or $100,000, whatever the number is, it will never be less than that. And then you can have growth based on really, really known indexes in the stock market, and you see really, really good growth with perfect protection. I call it a bank CD that touches the stock market.
There you go. Some of these questions come out. We have so many more to get to. A lot of you get the questions from radio. Where can people hear you on radio?
Yeah, so Brad, we're on every weekend, Voice of Maine and GAN, the radio shows. I've had listeners for the radio shows for over a decade. And even a lot of our clients will listen to the radio show. A lot of times they listen for the questions, Brad, because they try to see if they can get them, right?
Absolutely.
Jeopardy time.
We want you to listen. We appreciate you watching. More importantly, we'd love to have you come into the office. Ask the questions in person, because your questions are different than anybody else's. Your plan, your retirement, it's all yours. Let's make it the best it can be. 877-241-7430. As always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.